Welcome to the Kawartha Small Business Podcast, where we believe the Kawarthas can be the most thriving region in Canada for small business. I'm Brian Rump from Profit Coach.
And I'm Matt Garrity of Manage Digital.
And before we get started, head over to kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca/checklist and download Matt and Brian's marketing checklist for Kawartha small businesses. All right, today we are recording from the Thrive Podcast Studio at Thrive Co-working Community, 18 Kent Street West in downtown Lindsay. And we have with us Dennis Geelen. Hopefully I pronounced that correct.
Pretty close. Geelen.
Geelen.
Yeah.
I always go back and forth.
I've been called worse.
He's been called worse. And we are talking about his new book that's going to be launching in a couple of days from when this is published, The Accidental Solopreneur.
Yeah.
So tell us about the book.
Yeah, the book is really, it was a journey for me to write, but the book itself is, it's a fictional parable. It's about somebody who gets burnt out in their corporate job and decides they need to make some changes and decides to go on their own path of solopreneurism, if that's a word. And so the book really follows their journey, all their anxieties, all the mistakes they make, all the wins, all the learnings, all the people that they encounter, and really just try to show people what it feels like and what the transformation is like to go from the corporate world to the solopreneur world.
Yeah, that's a big journey, especially from, I think, corporate world.
Yeah.
What do you think are some reasons people are burnt out from the corporate world?
Oh boy, yeah. Where do you start? Obviously, the pandemic has been a huge left turn that came out of nowhere, and just that whole, okay, you're working from the office, now you're working from home, okay, now we got to get you set up here. Oh, now we're calling you back into the office, and just as you're getting used to, if you're in a corporate job, starting your job, working your way up the ladder, getting to know your teammates, getting into that routine, you start to get comfortable with that. All of a sudden it's, okay, now work from home. Well, that is going to take some getting used to. And now it's back into the office. And I think the pandemic really showed people that there's different ways to go about work. So they're starting to realize there's another way. Is climbing my way up the corporate ladder what is really best for me? Is jumping in my car and fighting through traffic and then sitting in an office really the best way to be utilizing my time? Is there more to life than just promotions and titles and money? So I think there's several different factors involved that have just caused a lot of people to get burnt out or disillusioned with the corporate world.
Yeah, I think we just start questioning everything.
Yeah.
Especially, I think in the corporate world, there's such a culture to that. You mentioned, going in, building your way up the ladder.
Yeah.
They used to talk about, loyalty, right? I was, probably similar to you. My dad worked at the same corporate job from when he was 18 until they closed and said, see you later, you're gone. They sort of throw you away, and it impacts your identity. So I think some people have seen the pandemic and they start questioning that, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah. No, and nothing against the corporate world. I mean, there's a lot of people that thrive and do really well in the corporate. I was one of them. I mean, from the age of, I think I started my first corporate job at the age of 22 or 23, and until the age of 43, I loved it. I was learning a lot. I was thriving. I was working my way up the corporate ladder. But I would say into my late 30s, early 40s, I started to kind of question, okay, is there more to life than this? It's exciting in the beginning. You're learning, you're growing, you're maturing, you're getting new skills. But then you start to attach your identity with, well, this is who I am. And it wasn't until, maybe I hit 40, I was like, is this really who I am? Or is this just what I do during the day? Like Superman got his day job, right? So I started to kind of question a little more, could I do something different? What if I bet on myself what would life look like if I really designed my work around what I'm passionate about and doing something on my own. And then at 43, exactly, I was laid off.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden those little thoughts in the back of my head all of a sudden rushed to the forefront, and it was, maybe this is my time. Maybe this is where I do bet on myself and go for it. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Matt, have you ever worked a corporate job?
I don't know, like corporate in the sense of I worked at a couple different companies where there was 100 people when I first started. And right out of school, I had a job where I was there for 7 years, and it was comfortable. But exactly what you just described, I started to think, if this job goes sideways, and frankly, if this owner gets hit by a car, there's no infrastructure in this company. And is this my identity? Like, do I want to be the guy that's in this? It was a construction type of industry, marketing in a construction type of world.
Right.
And doing a bunch of other stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to do this forever. Like, I like marketing, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be stuck in this, like, contractor world.
Yeah.
So, like, that's where that came from. And then the next job I took was the first step in digital marketing, where it was very corporate. There was, like, the owners and then, like, hierarchies, and it was extremely corporate, politics. The stuff that management was talking about was in this area, and all the people on the floor was like, this isn't what we do. This is not what we're good at. This is not what I aligned.
Two different views of the company at all.
Yeah. And like, did I do well in a corporate environment? I don't think so. I think that I am the person, like, I'm terrible. I used to be terrible at taking tests. I was not a good studier. I still can't read very well. I bought Dennis's book 100 years ago. I still haven't read it. Like, it's like I'm not a good reader. And like, I realized in college, my last year of college, I'm like, you're not going to get ahead by like studying. You're going to get ahead by paying attention in the class.
Right.
And then I'm great at presentations.
Right.
I don't know if I'm as great at presentations now, but like, I recognize, so I'm not great on paper, but I'm good in a room.
Right.
So like, corporate world, there was like one of the last corporate jobs I had. My mentor was always like having to fight for me because he was like, you're good in a room and you can save accounts, and they would bring me in on tough ones when things were going sideways, and I would come in and I would kind of save them. But like, management was like, I don't really get this guy. Like on paper, everything's like whatever, like nothing fancy or anything like that. So like, I never really thrived in the corporate environment. I think I always needed to be on my own, but I never realized I wanted to.
Yeah.
Until it happened. Where, like, I won't get into too many details, but it got to the point where one of the biggest things, I've said this again and again, I think on this podcast, is like, I got sick and tired of other people being in charge of my livelihood. Where it doesn't matter how long you climb that ladder, management keeps adding more ladders, or they'll take out a rung along the way. And I got frustrated with that. Right. And it didn't matter how much you contributed, you weren't really going to get ahead. Yeah. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm going to make it on my own.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, just in terms of that mindset switch. So where the book probably comes into play is that, what are people thinking and feeling, or they realize someone else is in charge of my livelihood. Yeah. Right? I think back, and one reason I don't think I could ever work corporate again is I don't ever want to ask permission to take a holiday or something like that. Or you fill in the form and it's like, oh, will I get to...
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Can I go away for Christmas this year to visit family? And it's like, oh, sorry, no, you can't do that. Yeah. Right? And then they talk about loyalty, but it's not loyal back. I read a great tweet recently that's like, if you leave or die at work, they'll repost your job. Yeah. By the end of the day. Yeah. Right?
There's a quote I like to use that says, the cemetery is full of irreplaceable people. Like, you think you're replaceable at your job? No, you're not. Yeah. Like, we all die at some point, or retire, or move up, or move into a different, and you're going to get replaced, right? So.
Yeah, and I think once you realize that, I think it opens up possibilities. Yeah. So tell us about, the protagonist and what some of those feelings are, and maybe what are the feelings that tip the scale of, should I take this leap?
So in the book, the main character is mostly based on me and my experience. It's not my exact story. I had to make it much more exciting. If I just told my story.
Exaggerate for effect sometimes.
Exactly. If I wrote my story, I might sell 5 copies of the book. So I tried to make it much more animated, much more tension, added in other characters. But the basic premise was he's at that point where I was, where starting to think, is there more? Should I and can I bet on myself? And with the encouragement of his wife, which is also part of my story, lots of support, lots of encouragement there, he decides I'm going to do it. And then the journey starts. All kinds of stress, all kinds of questioning, all kinds of euphoric moments where he gets his first client, and all kinds of stress or anxiety where he finds out, I didn't structure that engagement properly. Look at the big mistake I made. Or he takes on the wrong client. Or he starts to get imposter syndrome because now he's attracting work that he doesn't even think he can do. What do I do? Do I take this on? Do I turn it down? So it just follows his whole journey until you see him finally figuring things out. Lots of mentors along the way, giving him help, giving him pointers, people that are really givers, which I've had through my journey and very thankful for. So really tried to just show that inner struggle part of the journey in the book.
Almost everything that you're saying I can resonate with. And I'm just thinking now, did you talk to other entrepreneurs and business owners? Or is this just like a commonality we all have as entrepreneurs and business owners?
Since I started my own consulting company, Zero In, I've been talking to other solopreneurs, people doing throughout the entire, I needed to have this tribe. I needed to feel, what are you doing? How's it feeling for you? Am I alone here that this is stressful sometimes? Like 1 minute I'm crying in the shower, next time on a podcast talking about how great this is, right? So is that normal? Like, how are you doing? It was really hearing other people's stories, hearing other people's journeys, and feeling like, there's a lot of commonality here. And then even when I was finished the first draft of the manuscript, I sent it out. I think I had 15 different beta readers of other people that I know have gone through a similar journey to me. I wanted to hear their feedback. And almost to a person, it was like, oh my God, I think you just wrote my story. Yeah. So I was like, okay, this is resonating. This is the story that people need to know about. There's all kinds of how-to books out there. And there's that in this book as well. There's lots of lessons and there's stuff. But there's a lot more to starting your own business than just follow these steps.
There's no, I have someone I'm working with now who kind of wants their exact step-by-step playbook, and everyone has to write their own.
And even beyond that playbook, what's that inner transformational journey that you're going to go through? Because going from corporate to betting on yourself is more than just follow these steps. You're going to change internally because of this. And here's what it's going to look like. That's what I really wanted the undertone of the book to be about.
Do you think this is something I think about a lot? People who are having that shift are probably really good in corporate. They've had lots of promotions and success. They're probably way more skilled than they think they are. I see that all the time with people who think, I don't really have any skills. And it's like, what are you talking about?
Right.
But they've never really experienced failure before. Right. Or they have like a little bit of failure.
Yeah.
How do you think failure plays a part into that leap to solopreneur?
Yeah, it was huge for me. I'll tell you straight up from the beginning, I was extremely naive. I just looked at myself and said, hey, I do have experience. I've got 20 plus years in the corporate world, most of it spent in senior management positions where I knew about strategy, I knew about project planning, I knew about optimization, I knew how to consult with clients once I got them, no problem. I had no idea about sales. I had no idea how to start a brand. I had no idea how to market myself. I had no idea I even had to know those things. So there was failure from step one. I just thought, I'll create a logo, I'll give myself a company name, and I'll create a website, and voila, the customers will come rolling in. And that was a huge eye-opener for me that, no, you're starting a business now. you got to market, you got to brand, you got to get your message out there, you got to network, you got to build credibility, you have to learn how to package your services and sell your services. And oh my goodness, I don't know how to do any of that. I have to start learning and failing and reiterating. And that was a huge hit to my ego, I would say, my pride, where I just envisioned in my mind, I'll start this up and within 3 months I'm going to be this successful consultant. And it took a lot of failure to humble me and figure out what I actually had to do.
I think one of my biggest takeaways is that learning just how to fail is such a skill that I think, I know for me, I didn't have that a lot, and it took a while to like embrace that failure. Yeah. And now it's almost like a game to go out and seek some. So not like disastrous failure, but like, leap in. And I think for a lot of people in that seat, they have to really figure out how to get comfortable with it. And I know in innovation, you talk about failing fast sometimes, and like really embracing that fast failure, and just know that you're going to face that a lot.
Yeah, and what do you learn each time? Why didn't that sales call go very well? Yeah. Why didn't that new ad I put out attract anything? Why isn't that new package I'm putting out there attractive to anybody? So
I remember the first year of Managing Digital, everything went really well. Like really, really, really well. I remember saying to my wife at the end of the year, something bad's going to happen next year.
Like it's coming.
It's bound to happen. Something has to go wrong.
Right.
And it was COVID.
No, man.
I don't know if it was COVID specifically, but
so you're to blame. Way to go. Thanks a lot, man.
But it's like everything went too well. And I was like, you hear these things about failure and like you have to learn it. I'm like, first, there's a lot of failure, of course, in the first year, but it all went really well. I scaled so quickly. But I learned little things at the time, but I didn't have enough time to actually think about what had gone wrong. Yeah. I don't like the word failure either, though, in the way that we're saying it, though. I think it's like there's things that went wrong. We didn't go the way we wanted them to. I don't think any of them were failures, though.
I think it's a great, and we've talked about this before, it's like how you use failure. And I know I've had to embrace the word failure because I never really had a lot of like pure failure, but maybe setbacks. Mm-hmm. But it was actually, I think, in the learning about innovation context, about trying to fail fast and like building it as a skill is how I see it. So we have this dramatic vision of failure as like a business owner where someone's coming to take the keys to your house. And I learned at one point in my banking career, it doesn't really happen that often. So I remember when I first moved to commercial banking and I was working with an old seasoned lender, and this guy came in and he thought he was going to hand over the keys to his business that day because like everything was going wrong. It was a multi-million-dollar business, all sorts of stuff in play, and he was like, I'm done, checks are bouncing, it's a massive disaster. And he came in sort of expecting that dramatic failure. But that's not really what happens. So even watching in the bank, that's like step one is like admitting it. And then it's like, let's work through this. Within 2 months, that guy had partially sold his company to another company. It was running again. It worked out sort of the natural progression of things. Yeah. And that dramatic failure never happened. And I think that fear is one that people have. It doesn't really happen. Like things are going to work out. If something doesn't work, backup plans.
My mindset going in when I first started Zero In, my consulting company, was I'm going to give it a full year. At the end of a year, 365 days, I'll take stock. Is this working? If it is, great, keep going. If not, I can easily jump back into the corporate world. I can easily do something else. But even if I wasn't successful at getting Zero In off the ground and replacing my income as a full-time job, I would still have learned so much. So that's not a failure. Yeah. And I would never have that regret of what if, right? I would know I gave it a full year. I bet on myself. I tried. I wouldn't be looking back at the age of 65 going, man, I wish I had tried starting my own company. I would say, hey, I did try and I gave it a full year. So in both cases, neither is a failure in my mind, right? It's kind of like what you said. There's never going to be this devastating, oh my God, foreclosure on my house. I'm living homeless in the streets now. It's, hey, I tried it. Maybe it didn't go as the way I wanted, but I learned, I grew, and it's not a failure in the sense of this big grand thing.
Yeah. I have two questions. One is, do you think a year is long enough? Looking back now?
So I kind of ran into the same problem as Matt, this thing came along. I don't know if you heard of it, called COVID.
Yeah.
So I was just actually getting going. I started Zero In around September, October of 2018. By September, October of 2019, I finally made all the mistakes, figured things out enough that, man, I got this now. So a year was about right for me. Could I have taken longer? Yes, if I made more mistakes and, whatever. Could I have done it faster? Probably as well. But I thought a year was about appropriate. I guess depending on the business you're doing as well. Like for me, it's a solopreneur consulting business. There's not a lot of startup costs. There's not a lot of business planning involved in getting that going. It's really establishing yourself as an expertise and getting a package and getting it out there. But just like Matt, I was finally on a roll. I was getting all these clients. I was doing all these workshops, and then along comes COVID, and I had to pivot, and boy, that threw a wrench in everything as well. So it's hard to say, but I think a year was appropriate for me in my circumstances.
Yeah, I think a year is an interesting. We see it sometimes as a long time, but I think it's kind of a short time, and it might be a good amount of time to know, do I have traction?
Yes.
Have I figured that stuff out? Versus have I made X amount of money? This type of goal. Because a year, it sometimes takes you a year to. You're going to have some failures.
For sure. I did not replace my full-time income within a year. But it was more. Is that there? Do I have the traction now? Have I got it figured out? Is the blueprint there? I was making money. I was on track. Actually, the first quarter of 2020, I was on track to make more money than I did all of 2019 because I finally figured it out. I had the roadmap. I had the blueprint. I had the offering. I knew how to network. I knew how to sell. And all this stuff was lined up. And then when COVID hit, half of it went down the drain. So.
How much did you lose, like when COVID came? Not money-wise, but...
Yeah. Luckily, I had signed on a huge client, and I was continuing with that even through COVID. So that was nice. But I had, I think, a half a dozen workshops that I had to cancel, and about 4 other consulting engagements that got put on hold. And most of them eventually got canceled once the 2 weeks to flatten the curve turned into much more than 2 weeks, right? Yeah, so I lost a ton of work.
Yeah.
What I gained was a ton of time. Mm-hmm. And because I had already done so well financially in the first couple months, I was able to sit down and write that book, The Zero In Formula. So that was a bit of a blessing in disguise when COVID came along.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Are you an author now, or are you a consultant?
I don't know if there's a number of books that you have to have under your belt. Consider yourself an author. I kind of just describe myself as both. I've written 4 books now.
Oh, wow.
The first 2 I don't really tell anybody about because luckily, maybe only a couple hundred people have read them. So, but they're still out there. They're on Amazon. If you want to see what the evolution of my writing looks like, grab my first 2 books. That would be the only reason to read them, I would say. But yeah, I would describe myself as both. The majority of my revenue still comes from consulting.
Sure.
I tell all kinds of people, hey, if you're looking to get rich off writing a book, write about 20 bestsellers because that's what it's going to take before you become rich as an author, right? My last one hit bestseller. I'm hoping the next one, The Accidental Solopreneur, actually outsells my last one, which would be a good goal. But even still, I'm not retiring off that money, right?
There's very few, something like 3% of books written will make real money.
It makes my money back on what I spend on editors and graphics and publishing. the real thing is it attracts more coaching or consulting my way. People hear about me because I'm on podcasts, or they read my book, or whatever, and then it just creates a whole other audience for my business.
Yeah, everything we do is like a marketing tool.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know anything about writing a book or marketing a book, but I can imagine, you're not going to make much money back off that, but it's a way to like, oh, this guy's got a book, I should check out his consulting company and kind of go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, one neat thing, we talk often of Dan Sullivan on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Sullivan writes a lot of mini books, but then got into major market books with Who Not How and The Gap and the Gain. And he makes, their deal is he makes $0 off the book. The sort of writing partner gets that, and they've sold lots of books, but so the business impact is people read the book and then they get to know about them and they show up ready to buy. So what they've made directly kind of from the book, people who read it and then joined their other businesses has been.
And that's exactly my business model is I make a little bit of money off the books after it pays off the expenses of it. I still get some recurring revenue coming in every month from new people that have bought the books. But that's a very low ticket item.
Yeah.
Then when they've read my book, it sends them to my website if they're interested. Oh, he's also got online courses if I want to dive deeper into this. Okay, that's a little higher ticket. Oh, I can book Dennis for a speaking engagement if we want him to come speak at our conference or at our company event. That's a little higher ticket. Oh, if we actually want to work with Dennis and have him consult with us and do some work with us. Well, so now I can appeal to all kinds of different levels of people with different budgets and different time and availability. If they want to dive deeper, here it is. It's all on my website on how you can work with me. So
yeah, that's awesome. Going back, another just question I had in my mind about sort of the failure and let's say the business goes well or it fails and you want to go back into corporate. What do you think the impact is for getting hired back to corporate for somebody who's maybe climbed a bunch of ladders, took some time to run their own business, and now back in? I have a very strong opinion, but I want to hear yours.
To be honest, this is something I do think about a lot because I often wonder, am I eventually going to get bored with this? Or there are times where I'm like, there's parts of the corporate world I miss. I miss being part of a team. I miss not having to be the one with everything on my shoulders the entire time. And when I'm building my business, it's great to have other people that have different responsibilities and I'm just a cog in the wheel. There's parts of that I do miss. But I often wonder, have I shot myself in the foot by leaving corporate, doing my own thing? Am I even employable if I was going to try and get back into the corporate world? My sense on that is, from my own experience, I am way more valuable to a company now than I was 5 years ago. I've had to learn a ton. I've had to learn marketing. I've had to learn sales. I've had to learn how to package products. I've had to learn how to network properly. I've had to learn how to scale my business. I've had to learn how to do all this stuff that I was never exposed to before. If I was to get hired back into a company, I have a million more skill sets now than I did 5 years ago. However, if I look at it from the company's perspective, they're usually looking for a specialist for a very special role. If you're an accountant, they don't care that you know how to brand yourself. They don't care that you know how to market yourself. They want a good accountant. So even if your resume, for 15 years was in accounting and all they see is, well, the last 5 years you've built your own personal brand, has that made you look like less of a good employee? I'm not sure, right? So there's two sides to that.
Yeah, so I have a very strong opinion on this.
All right, let's hear it.
I think it helps for the right company. So
it's the right company.
If you want to dive into, I've been joking lately about all these exciting opportunities. You probably get them too. My inbox and LinkedIn is full of we'd like you to apply to this exciting opportunity. And it's like, you get to work alone. You don't have any leadership. You get to use a fax machine. Like, that type of stuff.
That sounds exciting.
You know, maybe they don't want me. Maybe I don't get through the interview where there's a panel of people with a checklist who don't really listen to you. But that right corporation, that right business wants all of those skills, I think, are going to bet on someone who's bet on themselves.
Yeah,
100 times over.
I think just a lot of it depends on the leadership.
Yeah.
Are they really just looking for some cogs in the wheel?
Yeah.
Or do they actually want really good people to come in and help with the business? And sometimes if you got too much of a prideful or egotistical leadership team, they might feel threatened by somebody who has built their own business.
Don't want to work for them anyway.
Exactly.
But I think for the right, if you really, want that corporate life to keep climbing and success, the right leadership team is going to, I think, spot that stuff. And so to me, that makes the leap to solopreneur. Everyone sees it as this risky thing.
Yeah.
But I think in the long term, it's not really that.
So what if we actually look at it in a same question, slightly different thing? What about companies allowing their employees to have their own personal brand and do some sort of side hustle? I know there's a lot of companies or leaders that would really frown on that. Like, no, you are an accountant. You are a project manager. You are a whatever for our company. That's what we want you to look like on LinkedIn. That's what we want you to talk about. But then there's other companies that I think would see the value in going, wow, this person has built a personal brand. They've built a following. Yeah. They've shown an expertise. And guess what? They work for us. Yeah, they see the value in that.
I think that's a smart move. I have a friend who I met through the Profit First community, and he's in Texas, and his brand is the Entrepreneur's Banker.
Right.
And I couldn't tell you what bank he works for, but he's a corporate bank employee.
Right.
But he's the Entrepreneur's Banker. Yep. So guess who's phoning him up whenever they need banking?
Yeah.
I think that's a great sort of partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not.
I know a lot of the podcasts I've been on in the last couple of years. For some, it's people who are solopreneurs. They've got their own business. They got their own podcast. But some of them are executives that have very high level roles in companies, and they have their own podcast. And at first, I was like, "Wow, your company allows you to do that." And for the ones that have really built a successful podcast, they're like, "Yeah, they love it because that guy works for us."
Yeah.
Right? He's built this following, or she has this amazing podcast where they bring on all these top-notch guests, and now our brand gets to be associated with their brand. And I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. But does every leadership team have the humility to be able to allow that and be okay with that? It takes a good leader to understand the value there.
Yeah, that's the problem. I feel like we're just dumping on corporations and employers, but I think it takes, like you said, the right business, the right business owner. But that's what you want, though. You want your people to be individualized, have specialties, have their brand, be people that you can grow and help you grow, and all those things.
Yeah.
It's the best way to retain them sometimes.
Yeah.
Looping back to the book and the course.
Yep.
Tell us about that. Who should take that?
So
when should they?
The biggest question I get from people is, this is a very different book. Like the first 3 books I wrote were for businesses. It was, and especially the Zero In Formula, which hit bestseller, got translated into different languages. It was meant for medium-sized businesses that want to learn how to be more customer-centric and innovative. That's what my Zero In Consulting's about. That's what I do. The book was right in line with that. All of a sudden, I'm putting out a book for solopreneurs. And the first question was, what? I thought you were a customer experience and innovation and employee experience consultant. Why are you? So the way that happened was around this time last year, I started thinking, okay, it's time to start writing a new book. And I started writing another business book. Similar style to the Zero In Formula, different theme. But I started realizing something. I've been documenting my journey on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook since I started Zero In. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm learning. Here's the mistakes I'm making. Here's some advice I would give to other people trying to do the same thing. So by this time last year, I started getting a ton of people reaching out saying, hey, can I pick your brain for a minute? Hey, I want to start a solopreneur practice like you did. What do you think about this? How about that? Am I doing this right? Am I doing? And I started thinking, boy, there's an audience there. Why don't I write a book on starting your own solopreneur practice? So that's really where that came from. But I didn't want it to be like the Zero In formula, where it was just, here's the formula, follow these steps. Because yes, that's important, and that's what the course goes into. What I really wanted people to understand was there's a lot more to it than that. There's a ton of stuff that goes on inside you, internally, that you're going to struggle with, that you're going to have to almost do this detox from corporate to learn how to be your own boss and design your own week, design your own life. And that's a bit of a struggle. What does that feel like? And that is really what you need to be prepared for, more than how to start your own business. That's really the premise of the book. And then the course is, hey, now if you really want to dive into how to do this, here's a roadmap. Here's my 6 steps to being a solopreneur. Here's the order you need to follow them. These ones are iterative. Here's how you do it. It comes with a workbook where I take you through how to find your niche, how to design your offer, how to sell your offer, how to build an audience. If you really want a hands-on workbook, buy the course. If you really want a behind-the-scenes look of what's the life like of going from corporate to solopreneur, read the book.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's really neat and needed. Do you think that people always write the books that they wish they had?
Yes.
Which I think is really good. If you were to roll the clock back, would you have read the book?
I can tell you, in the beginning, like I said, I was very naive. I didn't think I needed any help. I've got 20 years of corporate experience. I know how to start a business. So probably not in the beginning. I wouldn't have even known that I needed to read the book. But I did hit a certain point in my business where it was kind of that, those different steps of learning. You don't know what you don't know. And then all of a sudden it's, you understand what you don't know. And then you get to a point where you learn so much you forgot what you know type thing. Like it got to a point where I was like, oh man, here's a bunch of stuff I don't know. Mm-hmm. So then I started looking. And that's at the point of my journey where I started to get overwhelmed. And it felt like I had 3 choices. Figure this all out myself. Just go through the process, learn by doing. That's going to be the least expensive, at least for putting capital in it. But it's going to be very expensive time-wise, and I might make a lot of expensive mistakes. I went down that road and soon figured, okay, I needed some help. Great, there's all kinds of business books out there. There's all kinds of YouTube channels with how to market, That was overwhelming. There's too much information. Well, which information is appropriate for me? I'm starting a very specific type of business. How do I weed through all that information? So I went down that road for a while and figured out that's really not the road for me either. I need to learn from somebody who has built a very similar business and who's done it recently. Because starting a business 20 years ago is very different from starting a business now with social media and paid ads and Google. How do you do it now? So when I got to that point, I could not find the right tool, resource, book, mentor. And that's exactly why I wrote this book. This is for Dennis from 4 years ago.
Yeah.
This is the book I wish was out there. This is the course I wish was out there. Just boil it down to what I need to know. I don't need all this other information. Just, I'm starting a solopreneur business. What do I need?
That's awesome. I can give some tough love to our listeners. I would say buy the book, read it, buy the course. Because I think I was curious what you would say, because I look at my own self and I'm someone who reads a lot, but I might not have read a book like that. But I found there's certain books I'll buy or know about on my radar, and I kind of resist reading them. Mm-hmm. And then when I do, it's like, why didn't I read this one before?
Yeah.
And even online courses, it's a fairly common thing. I think sometimes you think, oh, that's so expensive. It's, Usually most are like under $500.
Yeah.
But then you realize at some point that that's almost nothing.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah.
buy the course,
Well,
take parts of it, and like, especially what I love about this is that solopreneur, if you're going to, burn a year figuring things out, this investment could turn that year into 8 months.
Yeah.
And that compounding effect of that is huge.
And that's kind of exactly how I market the course was learn from my mistakes, take months, maybe years off your journey. And I found the same thing with courses. There was all kinds of options out there. I did end up taking one. It was way more money than I thought, but I thought it's going to be worth it. It wasn't. And I thought, oh man, I don't want other people to see this like that. I priced this course extremely low. It's $75 American. And I thought, I want no barriers to entry. You really want to learn. You really want it boiled down and with resources. And I want people who are in the position I was 4 years ago to see this as a no-brainer. There you go. Grab the course, boil through all the stuff, But at the end of the day, nobody learns to ski by reading a book.
Yeah.
You still need to do it, right? So I can give you all the advice. I can write all the books. I can even give you a course. In the course, I'm encouraging them. Here's step 1. Now go iterate. Try this out. See what's working, and then go on to step 2. It's going to be practice, practice, practice. It's still not going to happen overnight just because I'm giving you all the information that's going to make it easier for you. You still have to put in the work and the practice to make this happen.
Yeah, I love that. It's a good framework, I think, to follow. I think the other thing that it really helps is avoiding those common failures.
Yeah.
So, you're going to start, you're going to learn how to fail, but let's take away some of the failures that someone else has had and maybe try to avoid those.
For sure.
Awesome. Any last thoughts?
From me, I would say, and Matt kind of touched on it here as well, maybe the first half of this, it sounded like we were kind of putting down corporate. And I say this in the intro to my book, it's everybody's different. Yeah. Some people are just not meant to be employees. They're unemployable. Those are the people that you want starting a business. They're creative. They're throwing stuff out there. They're taking risks, and they don't like being pigeonholed. But then there's people who would not be a very good entrepreneur at all. They need structure. They need routine. They need comfort zones. They don't want to take risks. And then there's people that are kind of in between, right? Maybe I just want to do a bit of a side hustle. I like my corporate job. I thrive on it. I like my teammates. Really, what I'm encouraging people in this book is if you even have an inkling to try something, read the book. Don't just quit your corporate job and go all in like I did, right? In my case, I didn't quit. I was laid off. I did have a nest egg there of a severance package and a bit of a runway, but don't just do a knee-jerk reaction and go, you know what, I'm kind of fed up with the corporate world. I'm going to go off on my own. Start as a side hustle and see if you are cut out to be an entrepreneur. See if you can find success there. And maybe just being a corporate employee with a side hustle is for you. That's great. If not, and this really starts to work and you really start to see some success there and you're able to replace your daily income from your corporate job with your solopreneur job, then go ahead and make that jump. But I've had too many people reach out to me saying, hey, I want to quit my job and do this. I'm like, don't quit your job. Try this on the side first. Learn, go through all the mistakes, and then only if you're starting to see some success, maybe then make that transition, because that inner journey is the hardest part, I find.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's our episode for this week. So thank you. Check out our show notes for a link to the book and the course. And thank you for listening. If you'd like to be on the podcast, we'd love to help you start, recharge, or grow your business. You can reach out to us at setitup@kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca.